The master's wife's beautiful sister became pregnant by Selva. One choice cost him everything. The night the child's secret came out, thunder shook the old plantation house. A scream cut through the rain, sharp and full of fear. Lamps were lit in a rush. Doors opened. And in the middle of it all stood Selva, a young enslaved man, soaked to the bone, staring at the floor while the master's wife held a truth that could destroy many lives. No one spoke his name out loud, but everyone knew. One choice, made in silence and love, was about to cost Selva everything he had, including the woman he loved most. This story takes us to the early 1800s, on a wide plantation surrounded by fields and fear. Life here moved by strict rules. Masters ruled. Slaves obeyed. Love was not allowed to cross lines. Selva was born into chains, but carried a calm strength in his heart. Clara was the master's wife's younger sister, known for her beauty and gentle voice. Watching them was Margaret, the master's wife, a woman torn between duty and quiet kindness. None of them knew how deeply their lives were about to twist together. If you enjoy deep, emotional stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to Whispered Pages Studio. Your support keeps these stories alive. The plantation of Hollow Creek sat heavy under the sun, its white house shining while dark shadows lived behind it. Selva worked in the fields from dawn to dusk. He spoke little, but people noticed him. He was careful, respectful, and kind in small ways that mattered. When others were angry, Selva stayed quiet. When others lost hope, he kept going. Margaret, the master's wife, noticed him too. She was not a cruel woman, though she lived inside a cruel system. Sometimes she asked Selva to carry letters or fix small things near the house. She trusted him more than she should have. Then Clara arrived. Clara was Margaret's younger sister, sent to Hollow Creek to recover from a sickness and a broken heart. From the first day, she noticed Selva, not as a worker, but as a man. Their eyes met often, then longer than safe. Words were few at first. A greeting, a thank you, a quiet smile. Everyone knew such feelings were dangerous. But the heart does not follow rules written by fear. And slowly, without meaning to, Selva and Clara stepped onto a path that could only end in loss. Life at Hollow Creek went on as if nothing had changed, but under the calm surface, everything was shifting. Selva tried to keep his distance from Clara. He knew the danger. He knew one wrong step could bring pain not only to him, but to her as well. Still, fate kept placing them near each other. In the mornings, Clara walked the garden paths to feel the sun. Selva was often there, trimming hedges or carrying water. They spoke softly, always careful, always watching. "How long will you stay here?" Selva once asked, his eyes on the ground. "I don't know," Clara replied. "Long enough to breathe again." Those small talks became the best part of their days. Clara had lived a sheltered life, but she was not blind. She saw how Selva was treated, how his time was never his own. And yet, he carried himself with quiet pride. That drew her closer. She listened when he spoke about his mother, sold away years before. She felt his pain even when he hid it behind silence. Margaret watched all this from a distance. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Clara was lonely. Selva was polite. But a woman knows when something is growing. Margaret began to notice the way Clara's face softened around Selva, and the way Selva froze whenever Clara entered a room. One evening, Margaret called Selva inside to fix a loose step near the back hall. As he worked, she studied him. "You seem troubled lately," she said gently. "I am fine, ma'am," Selva replied, though his hand shook. Margaret said nothing more, but her eyes followed him long after he left. As weeks passed, Clara and Selva's bond deepened. They never touched in daylight. They never spoke too long. But at night, when the plantation slept, they met near the old oak tree by the river. There, away from watching eyes, they spoke freely. "I hate this world," Clara whispered one night. "I hate that loving you feels like a crime." Selva closed his eyes. "I hate that I cannot protect you from it." They knew what they were doing was forbidden. Still, love grew, quiet but strong. And with love came hope. Dangerous hope. Margaret's worry turned into fear when she saw Clara growing pale and distant. Clara lost her appetite. She tired easily. Margaret, who had been a young woman once, knew the signs. Her heart sank. One morning, Margaret found Clara sitting on her bed, crying softly. "Tell me," Margaret said, sitting beside her. "Please." Clara tried to lie, but the truth fell from her lips like broken glass. She spoke Selva's name, shaking with fear. Margaret stood up slowly. Her hands trembled. This was more than scandal. This was ruin. "Do you know what this means?" Margaret asked, her voice tight. "I know," Clara sobbed. "But I love him." Margaret turned away, fighting tears. She did not hate Selva. She did not hate Clara. But she feared her husband's rage more than anything. The master of Hollow Creek was a hard man, proud and unforgiving. From that day on, Margaret watched Selva closely. She avoided Clara's eyes, and Selva felt the change immediately. He sensed danger moving closer, like a storm. Whispers began among the servants. A glance held too long. A rumor spoken too quietly. Selva heard his name once or twice, followed by sudden silence. One afternoon, Selva was called to the main house. Margaret stood near the window, pale and stiff. "You must stop seeing her," she said without turning. "For both your sakes." Selva swallowed hard. "I would give my life for her, man." Margaret faced him then, tears in her eyes. "You may have to." As Selva left the house, he felt something heavy settle in his chest. Love had brought him joy, but now it was dragging him toward a cliff he could not escape. And far away, thunder rolled again, as if the land itself knew that the worst was still to come. The truth does not stay hidden forever. At Hollow Creek, it came out on a night filled with wind and rain. The master returned home earlier than expected. His boots echoed through the halls, sharp and loud. Servants froze. Margaret felt it in her bones that something was wrong. Clara was upstairs, shaking, her secret growing harder to hide with each passing day. The master noticed everything. He always did. At dinner, his eyes fixed on Clara. She barely touched her food. Her hands rested over her stomach without thought. That small movement was all it took. "What is wrong with you?" he asked, his voice calm but cold. Clara tried to speak. No words came. Margaret stepped in quickly. "She is still weak from illness," she said. The master leaned back, watching both women. He did not believe them. That night, he ordered the house searched. He questioned servants. He listened to whispers. And finally, one frightened boy spoke Selva's name. The master's face went dark. Selva was pulled from his bed before sunrise. Rain poured as he was dragged into the yard. Clara heard the noise and ran to the window. When she saw Selva on his knees, her scream tore through the house. "Stop!" she cried, running outside despite Margaret's grip. The master raised a hand. "You will stay where you are." Clara fell to her knees in the mud. "It was my choice," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He never forced me. I love him." The word love seemed to break something inside the master. He laughed once, low and bitter. "Love?" he said. "You speak of love with property?" Margaret stood frozen, her heart splitting in two. Selva lifted his head for the first time. His face was bruised, but his voice was steady. "Punish me," he said. "Not her." That courage sealed his fate. The master ordered Selva taken away at once. "Sold." "Removed." "Erased." Clara screamed his name as they dragged him toward the wagons. She tried to follow, but Margaret held her back, crying just as hard. "Selva," Clara called. "Forgive me." Selva turned once. Their eyes met through the rain. He did not smile. He did not cry. He only nodded, as if to say he understood everything. By the time the sun rose, Selva was gone. The house fell silent after that. Clara did not leave her room for days. When she finally did, her body told the truth she could no longer hide. The master was furious, but now it was too late to undo what had been done. The child was coming. Margaret begged her husband to show mercy. "He is gone," she said. "What more do you want?" The master refused to speak of Selva again. To him, Selva no longer existed. Clara gave birth months later, in quiet pain. Margaret stayed with her through the night, holding her hand. When the baby cried for the first time, Clara wept harder than she had ever wept before. "It has his eyes," she whispered. The child was taken away soon after, sent to be raised out of sight, out of shame. Clara watched from the window as the carriage disappeared down the road. Something inside her died that day. As for Selva, no one at Hollow Creek ever learned where he was sent. Some said he was sold far south. Others said he did not survive the journey. But in Clara's heart, Selva lived on, frozen in that last look they shared. A love stolen by fear. A life ruined by one truth spoken too late. And Margaret, standing alone in the quiet house, knew that none of them would ever be the same again. After Selva was taken away, Hollow Creek felt like a place that had lost its soul. The fields were still worked. The bells still rang. Meals were still served. But something deep and quiet had broken. People spoke less. Laughter disappeared. Even the birds seemed to avoid the big white house. Clara moved like a shadow through the rooms. Her body healed slowly after the birth, but her heart stayed heavy. She rarely spoke. When she did, her voice sounded far away, as if she was talking from another life. At night, she sat by the window, staring down the long road where Selva had vanished. Margaret stayed close to her sister. She brought her tea. She brushed her hair. She tried to talk about small things, safe things, but nothing helped. Guilt lived inside Margaret now. She told herself she had done what she could, yet she knew it was not enough. One evening, Clara finally spoke. "Do you think he is alive?" she asked quietly. Margaret paused before answering. "I pray that he is." Clara nodded, tears sliding down her face. "If he is alive, then I can breathe. If not, then I don't know how to live with that." Margaret had no answer. The master avoided Clara after the birth. When he did look at her, his face held anger mixed with shame. He ordered the house to return to order, as if silence and rules could erase the past. But he could not erase the looks people gave him. He could not erase the truth that had stained his name. The servants noticed everything. They remembered Selva's kindness. They remembered how he had helped without being asked, how he had shared his food when others went hungry. His absence left a wound among them. At night, some whispered prayers for him. Others whispered anger. Weeks passed. Clara grew weaker, not in body, but in spirit. One morning, Margaret found her packing a small bag. "I cannot stay here," Clara said calmly. "Every wall reminds me of what I lost." "Where will you go?" Margaret asked. "I don't know," Clara replied. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere my heart can rest." The master allowed it without protest. Perhaps he saw her leaving as a way to bury the shame. Clara left Hollow Creek before dawn, without music, without goodbye from most. Margaret watched her carriage disappear, feeling as if part of her own heart was leaving too. After Clara's departure, Margaret changed. She became quieter, firmer. She no longer ignored cruelty when she saw it. She spoke up more often. It did not make her popular, but it eased her conscience. One afternoon, months later, a traveling trader stopped by Hollow Creek. He spoke of distant plantations, of people bought and sold like tools. Margaret listened closely. "Have you heard of a man named Selva?" she asked, her voice steady but hopeful. The trader thought for a moment. "I heard that name once," he said slowly. "A strong young man, kept his head down, worked hard. He was sold again, farther away." Margaret's heart leapt. "Was he alive?" "Yes," the trader said. "Last I heard." That night, Margaret cried alone for the first time since everything happened. Tears of pain, but also of relief. Selva lived. Somewhere, far away, Selva struggled to survive under a new master. Life was harder there. Punishment came faster. Kindness was rare. But Selva held on. Not because life was easy, but because memory gave him strength. He remembered Clara's voice. He remembered her tears. And most of all, he remembered that once he had been loved as a man, not owned as a thing. That memory kept him alive. Back at Hollow Creek, Margaret began to understand something painful and true. Love had cost Selva everything. It had cost Clara her child, and it had cost her the peace she once believed in. The storm had passed, but the damage remained. And yet, deep under the pain, small seeds of change had been planted, seeds watered by regret, truth, and quiet courage. Years passed, and time softened some wounds, but it never erased them. Clara lived in a small town near the coast, far from Hollow Creek. She kept to herself and earned a simple living sewing clothes for families who knew nothing of her past. To them, she was just a quiet woman with sad eyes and gentle hands. But inside, she carried a story that never slept. Every year, on the same day, Clara lit a candle. She did not speak the reason out loud, but in her heart, she spoke Selva's name. She wondered where he was, if he was safe, if he ever thought of her. Some nights, the pain felt fresh. Other nights, it felt like a dull ache she had learned to carry. Margaret remained at Hollow Creek. The master grew older and colder, more bitter with each passing year. Their marriage became a quiet space filled with distance. Margaret focused her attention on small acts of kindness. She found ways to ease burdens, to protect when she could. It did not undo the past, but it changed the future in small ways. One autumn afternoon, news reached Hollow Creek that shocked everyone. A group of enslaved men had escaped from a distant plantation. One of them, it was said, had helped others learn to read. He spoke calmly. He led with care. His name was Selva. Margaret felt her knees weaken when she heard it. Hope rushed into her chest like a long-held breath released. She sent word quietly. She did not know if it would reach him. She did not know if it was safe. But she wrote one line, simple and honest. You are not forgotten. Weeks later, a reply came, carried through careful hands. I survived. Margaret cried as she read those words. For the first time in years, she felt that something good had come out of all the pain. Selva never returned to Hollow Creek. It was not safe. It was not wise. But he built a life in pieces, helping others, guiding them, sharing what little strength he had. The fire inside him had not died. It had changed shape. Clara never learned for certain that Selva lived, but she felt it. One day, she woke with a calm she had not known before. She smiled for the first time in years. Some truths do not need proof. The child she lost grew up elsewhere, unaware of the love that created them. That truth hurt Clara deeply, but she chose not to drown in it. Instead, she gave love where she could, in small and quiet ways. As for Hollow Creek, it aged and faded. The fields thinned. The house cracked. What once stood proud slowly fell into memory. Selva's choice had cost him his freedom, his home, and the woman he loved. But it also gave him something powerful, a reason to live beyond fear. Clara's choice had cost her her place, her child, and her old life. But it taught her that love, even when broken, can still shape who we become. And Margaret learned that silence can be as cruel as cruelty itself. Their lives never crossed again, but they remained tied by one truth. Love had changed them forever. Many years later, the world looked different, though pain still lived in its corners. Hollow Creek no longer stood as it once had. The great house was empty, its paint peeling, its halls quiet. Wind moved through broken windows like soft whispers from the past. People passed the land without knowing the stories buried beneath the soil. Margaret was an old woman now. Her hands shook when she walked, but her eyes were clear. She no longer lived at the plantation. She stayed in a small home nearby, cared for by those who once feared the house she had ruled. Before leaving Hollow Creek for the last time, she walked through every room, remembering faces, voices, and choices. At the edge of the fields, she stopped and whispered Selva's name. It felt like a prayer. Far away, Selva sat beneath a wide tree with children gathered around him. His hair had turned gray, but his back was straight, his voice calm and steady. He told stories of strength, of hope, of choosing kindness even when the world is cruel. He never spoke of his past in detail, but sometimes, when he paused, his eyes drifted toward the sky. He had loved once. That love had cost him everything, but it had also shown him his own worth. Clara lived her final years near the sea. She walked the shore every morning, letting the waves touch her feet. When asked if she had ever loved, she smiled softly and said yes. Once, deeply. That was enough. On her last day, Clara held a small carved stone she had kept for years. Selva had given it to her under the old oak tree long ago. She closed her eyes, peaceful at last. Somewhere in the world, the child born of that forbidden love lived on, unaware of the brave hearts that had shaped their existence. Love, even when hidden, leaves marks that time cannot erase. The story of Selva was never written in books. Clara's tears were never recorded. Margaret's guilt was never judged by history. But their lives mattered. This was a story of choice, of love whispered in the dark, of loss that broke hearts and strength that rebuilt them. And in the end, though Selva lost everything that night in the rain, he gained something greater. His soul remained free.